So my initial thought is, wow, that's harsh on Denver. But it definitely, when we've been doing the whole offseason thing, every time I fire up that Denver depth chart, I'm like, wow, this really isn't the team that it used to be a couple of years ago. Like, this is not a good looking roster. The offensive line, where they threw so many resources recently, still doesn't look great. Like, Garrett Bowles at left tackle is a really good, solid player. Quinn Miners at guard had a real breakout season last year. If he's still that guy going forward, then, that's 2/5 of your offensive line in really good shape. Mike McGlinchey's fine at right tackle. He's a capable, good starter. The other two spots, though, now look like potential problems. Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, or Sam Mustafa, or whoever you're going to put in there at center. So 2/5 of your offensive line isn't in great shape. The wide receiver room, which a couple of years ago looked so strong, is Cortland Sutton sort of, not quite becoming the player maybe that he was supposed to become, and a sort of long-term trade candidate maybe. Your guy Tim Patrick coming off injury. Marvin Mims, who's the offseason hype guy every year. Are we going to get more of him this year, or is he just going to be, that guy every year? And then, obviously the rookie Troy Franklin, the fourth rounder. But it's not like that's a group where you're going, this is amazing. This is, high level. The defense is like Patrick Surtain, and then all the good players have gone. Like, it's not a good roster.
Here's how I like to soften things. During optimism season here, we got big week of hype this week, Sam. Mini camp. We are finally to mini camp. And so there'll be plenty of, hype videos and swing passes that come from the main team accounts, hyping things up. I like to soften it by saying question marks. These teams just have more question marks.
A lot of question marks.
And so when it comes to the Broncos, remember how bad their defense was through about 6 weeks last year? Like, historically bad. How much do you weigh that? They absolutely turned a corner, started playing better. They turned the corner as a season, but a lot of that was turnover laced, right? They had a bunch of games with 3 and 4 turnovers. We know that tends to regress back, and that's what happened with Denver. So yeah, as we're looking at the depth chart, you've got all the question marks you mentioned at receiver. The offensive line that you mentioned is probably their biggest strength. I mean, that was in the graphic while you were talking. Probably their biggest strength out of this whole thing, and that's part of the issue, right? Questions at receiver, questions rushing the passer, and then questions on the back end outside of Patrick Surtain on defense. So, and then all of that added up to your quarterback as well. Bo Nix, QB6, as a rookie, right? And so a lot of these teams are going to have quarterback questions combined with some of the lack of depth here for the Broncos. That said, I would still probably put the Cardinals lower, maybe. I know Kyler's back, but
right. So I will say, I know we did this maybe last year, the year before, and I remember thinking this at the time. Like, you go back a while and you could find rosters that were like miserable looking. You know what I mean? Like, teams that were just terrible. There's nothing going for this team. There's zero talent on this roster. They've torn everything down. There's nothing left. This is the worst roster in the NFL, and it's not even close. And along with the sort of offseason trends of, teams are not doing as many crazy things in free agency with their money. They're not doing as many crazy things in the draft as they used to be. Like, this sort of general perception that teams are getting better at just football, like the NFL, the cycle. They're just getting better at knowing what they're doing. I think that translates to these roster rankings as well. Like, my initial reaction is to look at that and go, there's no way Denver has the worst roster in the NFL. And then you sort of unpick it and you go, okay, yeah, it's not a good roster and blah, but it's not terrible. Like, as you said, as much as the offensive line is a concern, it's 3/5 fine, right? The wide receiver room isn't what it used to be. On the other hand, Cortland Sutton is fine. Tim Patrick, if he comes back, is useful. We really like Troy Franklin, what he could be. The backfield has got talent. Like, there's bits and pieces you can pick out of that and say, there's stuff to work with here. And Arizona, you mentioned them as a potential candidate. I mean, Arizona, Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, that backfield of James Conner and Trey Benson, the other rookie, Greg Dortch, Trey McBride. Like, there's a lot of talent on that team. I think we've run out of teams now where or just teams are no longer awful at this. Like, you're just not going to get the bottom end of these rankings every year is not going to look just a never-ending stretch of misery. There's going to be some talent there.